All right, welcome back to Collateral Banter, episode 36. All right, well, I'm your host, Danny T. I just want to riff about the state of political chaos that we see today, American chaos. It's a surreal moment on this June 21st, 2019. It feels like the world is teetering on the edge of falling over the cliff. And I feel that we've been building towards this moment slowly since 2016. And it's just been progressing and inching ever closer. And initially, after the election of Trump and other leaders around the world, people were nervous, but were hoping, hey, maybe these people won't be so bad. Maybe just the way they campaigned is different than how they'll govern, and all of this nonsense. And we now see that the way they ran their campaigns is the way they governed, and they are the chaos. And they're governing in a chaotic manner. They want to shake up the world. They see the world as chaotic and a mess, and they're trying to bring it stability. That's what their thinking is. I'm here to bring it stability and order and hierarchy. And yet they're actually, in my view, bringing out even more chaos around this world. And there are many things I could talk about, but I'm going to focus on today's episode on the economy. Mainly because I did one episode several months ago on the economy, but something just isn't making a lot of sense to me, and I thought I'd share it with people. So essentially, the news is good for the stock market if you have any investments in the stock market, your investments are up. And it's near record highs, and things should be great. And what has shifted in the last couple of days? Because in the last few weeks, things were looking gloomy and down, but it is Trump tweeting about getting in new people into the Federal Reserve, potentially demote. He was asked about demoting the chairman of the Federal Reserve. The reason Trump was thinking about that is because Trump wants to lower interest rates right now. He wants a lot more easy money. He wants lower interest rates. And the fact that he demands it and tweets about it, somehow the institutions give in to it, right? And he's gotten away with it politically. Now he's even taking on the banking system, the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. And yet, people don't realize the danger that this moment poses. So I'm going to explain to you why I find it so dangerous. So a lot of the uneasiness and the sell-off in the stock market originated a few months ago when Trump began talking about China and putting tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the United States. The Chinese have threaten and impose tariffs on U.S. goods. That has begun this feud between China and the United States. So they've had meetings, and now we've reached a point where Trump is sticking to his guns and the Chinese are sticking to their guns. So you've reached a bit of an impasse in negotiations. Who knows how that got resolved? Trump isn't afraid to just put tariffs on Chinese goods and leave it at that and say, look, we'll impose it if they want to do it, that's fine, but we'll protect America and American jobs and all these other things. And of course, that has made the stock market worry because a lot of businesses are in China, are producing in China and sending their goods over, going to be more expensive and pay the price. Of course, Trump sees this as, if we put up tariffs, maybe the companies will make decisions to produce in America. And that will lower unemployment rate, and that will spur economic growth. But as I've seen articles today in CNBC, they are talking about the Trump economy now looking exactly like the Obama economy. It had this initial boost, and now it's returning back to this 1.82% growth rate. And the fact that Trump is pressuring people to lower interest rates is so crazy. At this point, okay, interest rates are only at 2.5%. They've gone up slowly over the last 2 years. But at 2.5% interest rates, if the Fed was to cut interest rates to zero again, sure, there might be some growth in the economy, very small growth. But what are you going to do if there's a downturn in the economy? If businesses have a fight with China, or Brexit becomes really nasty, and there are feuds erupting around the world, or there's chaos erupting in the Middle East, as I want to mention later. But if you don't cut interest rates, what are your options? You're going to go back to something they called quantitative easing, which is essentially printing money and giving it to the banks, and to some degree purchasing assets from banks and stimulating the economy that way. Trump thought he could come in, deregulate the economy, and the economy would go 3-4% maybe, and everything would be fine. Wages would come back, people would come back to the labor force. It does not seem to be happening this way right now, and that's the moment we're reaching at. And I want to say that interest rates, to fight off a recession, on average fall about 5%. We're at half that rate. If we don't have interest rates to cut, the only other option that we have is negative interest rates. So several countries have done this. And what this means is you go to a bank and you deposit $1,000. Over a set period of time, your $1,000 is no longer $1,000. It's $998. Okay? It's essentially a tax on savings. Essentially, they will take some of your savings away, which is why people take their money and won't put them in banks, but will keep them under the carpet or keep them away from the financial. Because who wants to lose $2 in a few months just because interest rates go negative? But in many ways, that is the way this economy is structured. So how do I think we got here? I mean, I think a large part of this is the way it's supposed to work. Okay, I'm going to explain to you the theory of how the economy is supposed to work. When interest rates drop, as they did during the 2008 economic crisis, to near zero, it's supposed to spur lending. So you're supposed to get banks, small banks, credit unions, everybody loaning to small businesses, to homeowners, or to people who want to buy homes, to home builders, to spur the economy, right? So you're supposed to stimulate massive amounts of investments by lowering interest rates. At the same time, so let's talk about the unemployment rate first. So the unemployment rate, when it reaches a certain level, and economists debate what that level should be, but it's around 4%. When it's around that level, what should be happening in theory is that employees, workers, have more power than their employers, and they begin demanding higher wages. They're supposed to say, look, the economy is very low. If you fire me from this job or I quit this job, I can go get another job in just a few months. And so I'm demanding higher pay, higher wages, greater compensation. Okay, that's the way the theory is supposed to work. And we've been at around 4% unemployment now, at least for the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years. It's been around 4%. So what should be happening is supposed to start seeing wages really pick up. And that should put pressure, this is the mainstream theory, on inflation, right? You're seeing very low unemployment, people are demanding wages, and then that trickles out throughout the economy. People have more money, so prices in goods around the economy should be going up, right? Everything becomes more expensive every year. And as workers and labor becomes more expensive, we should be pushing up inflation rates because wages are rising, so inflation should also be rising slowly with it. So that's how the theory is supposed to go. But what you've seen in the last 20 years, and nobody knows exactly what's causing this, but obviously you can see that the attack on labor unions and the low percentage of employees in a labor union means there's less organized labor pushing for higher wages, pushing for greater compensation, right? So you've seen that. You also have seen changes in the job sector, in technology, right? This sort of precarious nature of labor, but also the sort of technological breakthrough that we're seeing has dampened the ability of wages to go through. You're seeing a lot more people working side gigs, so those often are independent contractors. They're not employees with specific marked benefits. They're not in that compensation of being a full-time employee with all the full benefits and pay. And by not being in that more formal benefited employee, it's being harder and harder to push for greater wage and worker compensation. So you've seen unemployment go to extremely low levels. You've seen people drop out of the labor force, so people are no longer even looking for work. If they're not looking for work, they're not even considered unemployed. You've seen the labor participation rate, which is the percentage of the working age population that is currently working. That's at a historic low. So you've seen a lot of these, what I guess we can call structural changes to the economy. Structural, they look like permanent features. They're not features that are just temporary and they'll go away after a couple years or a couple months. They look like they've become part of the economy. And in many ways, these features we've been discussing, at least since Obama was elected in 2009 and 2010, have been present in the economy. And it's been hard to keep this economy going, even at 1.82%. And look, it's not contracting, but you've seen there's a real slowdown in the pace of the economy. And people thought, what, massive tax cuts and deregulation. And that's the reason, because a lot of more conservative people would say what's holding the economy back is government regulation and it's government intervention and it's high taxes. Well, we haven't had that now for nearly 3 full years, and you've already begun to see an economy that needs interest rates to be cut. But the truth of this is why this is an extremely dangerous moment in my mind, is if you're going to cut interest rates at this moment to stimulate the economy when it's at it might go back to 1.82% growth. What happens if the interest rates cuts don't stimulate economic growth? You have very few options. You can start printing money. People have gone to such extreme lengths in discussions. They're even debating throwing money out of helicopters for people. Can you imagine that? People on the streets of New York and Boston fighting over each other for $10, $20 bills, $100 bills in the middle of the streets because you see helicopters just throwing money down. I mean, that is crazy. But the thing is, if you cut interest rates to zero, money starts losing its value at some point. If you're keeping interest rates then at basically zero for then more than 10, 11, 12 years, 13 years. And so that should, in theory, cause a lot of people who feel very secure in the job market to be getting loans. But none of that seems to be happening. Look, I could talk about whether people aren't buying new homes. That goes back to student loan debt crisis that we have. People do not feel very safe. They're starting families later. I mean, this is all connected back to the economy. It's why I love talking about the economy, because whatever we want to talk about, there seems to be some economic origin to these. And it terrifies me. It terrifies me that we've reached a point where we might go back to 0% interest rates, not even have an official recession, but just an economic slowdown is now causing the president to tweet at the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has already changed their language and says, yeah, there's some weakening in the economy. It might be because of China and the tariffs that this administration has been pushing for, that weakening in the economy. Okay, that weakening throughout the economy, so we have to cut interest rates. Because I don't think it's going to work. It didn't work during 2009, 2010 economic crisis. I just have a feeling that this is a moment where you cut interest rates to zero and the economy doesn't pick up. You have very few to no options left. You're already heavily in debt. Government can continue borrowing and spending money. That might stimulate the economy up until the point where people stop loaning it money. But this all connects back to the digital economy, right? I was talking a little bit about at least technology and the changes that has done to the economy, this sort of revolution in technology, getting information and data. So I wanted to talk about that because there's one connection that I've been meaning to make and talk about in these episodes that I haven't done nearly as much or very clearly, but is how similar this data economy is to slavery. And let me explain. So during the time of slavery, the way they determined value of slaves was based on certain criteria of that slave, the size of their body, their hands. And so there was an economy in many ways that would determine value of a slave, okay, based on certain physical attributes, certain certain criteria of their body, right? And they use that to say, well, it's a bigger, stronger person, very tall, very lean, very strong. He's able to work a lot longer in the fields than somebody who's scrawny, skinny, and barely eats, can easily die, right? So they were determining slave value based on certain physical attributes that people determined about slaves. To some broad degree, this is how they were determining some value to slavery. Very few people actually could afford the cost of purchasing slaves in the country. Okay. So how is this related to the economy today? I gather that you look at the technology of the internet, phones, all of the digital economy also does this to people. Look, read Future Crime, read any book about data technology in the United States. There's a Harvard professor, Shoshana Zuboff, who's written a book about this. I have yet to read it. And the way the digital economy works, it wants to learn as much as it can about you. It wants to learn everything about you. How you go to work, where you're working, the relationships you're in, the places you go to, where you spend your money. It's all creating one giant profile about you, about your life, about where you work, where your education was from, or where your education is. And then they make out projections about you in the future, right? They want to project out what will be your earnings in the future, what will be your 5, 10, 15-year earnings based on your education levels, based on other people who went to the same schools and grew up in the same neighborhoods in the same family that you did, and then extrapolate out what kind of ads and advertising and businesses you'll likely buy in the future, right? So it is a profile economy about human beings. And like I was saying, it wants to know literally everything you do, what you eat in the morning, what websites you go to, what you like reading, and they tailor everything they can in advertising directly to that individual. Because imagine in the future, insurance companies looking around and picking up data and saying, wow, this person doesn't own a car, goes to work by public transportation, and goes to the supermarket and is walking around all the time. They're likely to need health insurance, so their health insurance should be lower than somebody who drives to work, drives to Walmart, drives to wherever they need to go, right? You could already see how this economy begins to create differentiation between those who don't go to work in a car and those who do, and how the geography will impact this. Where you're living. If you're living in a city, it's less likely you own a car. If you're in the millennial age, you're likely walking, so you're exercising, so you're moving around and keeping your body. The odds of you just dropping dead is less. But again, it also depends. Where are you eating? And they can know all this about you by your credit card transactions and your phones distributing all your data and things like that. Look, I wish I could do an episode where I could tell you how to keep safe, but people get paranoid about this. I'm merely talking about this is what is happening. Okay? But we know what the future is. And what the future will hold is, as people go out and do these 23andMe swabs of their mouth to see their genetic coding, but by the way, isn't even a scientific study. I mean, that should just be done for fun. People are doing that like it's some major genetic result and testing. I mean, these aren't guaranteed. You gotta read the fine print. Gotta read the fine print in what they're saying. It's not meant to be a fixed guarantee of what your diseases will be or your family lineage and things like that. I wonder if people do this genetic setting from 2 different companies and if they get 2 different results. I wonder what that says. And again, read the fine print. It's not meant for like guaranteed scientific. These are meant for sort of just having fun. But think about it. They get to keep what happens to your genetic swab when they get you to swab in your mouth and get your genetic coding. What happens then, huh? Well, I'll tell you. Those companies are going to take that and sell it to their highest bidder. And they'll be able to sell your genetic coding. Some way, somehow, they're going to get to do it. Okay? And when they do, I'm sure there's a bunch of health insurance and life insurance policies that would love to get your data, That is what it is about. And so my connection to slavery is they were making determinations based on slaves, based on certain physical appearances, and they're trying to measure, literally measure people's biceps, head, their body, their waist. They were making determinations based on physical attributes. And in today, it is just more pervasive. It is more direct. Today, they want to determine, what are you thinking about? What is it that you want? What is it that you've liked to do in the past? Where will you be tomorrow? Where will you be shopping? What's the likelihood in the next 3 to 5 years you're going to get married and have 2 or 3 kids or have no kids? They want to know all of this about you. But the way to get to you is to get through your brain. It is your brain that this internet is really learning from, right? This sort of knowledge that people are having, it comes from your brain. They're trying to aggregate your thoughts. They're actually able to figure out where you'll be tomorrow based on your previous habits and based on other people who share your certain attributes and criteria. But what does that say? Who's really in charge when there is a data economy that can know so much about you that they know more about you than you know about yourself? And you hear this all the time. And by the way, it's also about, who people are friends with. I'll tell you one of the creepiest stories I've read in recent books. A guy goes and makes a purchase at a hotel, and the credit card is blocked. And the guy doesn't know why his credit card was denied, why it was blocked. And here's the answer. The guy calls the credit card company, and the credit card company tells that person that based on recent transactions, they lowered this person's credit limit without ever telling him. Isn't that fascinating? So just based on where you're shopping, they can go out and decide to lower your credit limit immediately. And again, in America, unlike Europe, which again I've praised oftentimes in this show, and Europe is different in relationship to data, but data is this lifeblood of this economy. And I don't want to compare it to what it was previously because, I am comparing it to slavery. I'm just comparing the way those economies worked. But this to me is so fascinating that this economy is built off our thoughts, our habits, our ideas, who we are, and there's a constant push to push deeper and further, right? But you can't push too quickly, right? If all of a sudden they were like, please give up your DNA sample to us, nobody would take them up on it. So if you just make it about, hey, make it to your ancestors, make it to your family, they will eventually, you got to read the fine print. You got to read that legal document that you sign off or that you agree to if you purchase their documents, because it's there in the fine details that you'll see. They can do largely what they want with your data and your genetic coding. And I'm sure health insurance companies would love that because then they can tailor your health insurance directly to you. But imagine if you have a genetic predisposition towards diabetes and you're going to get charged higher health premiums. You'll never know it. You'll just say, hey, my health premiums are more than my neighbors. And I don't know, I guess I should exercise more. But you never know that it was because you gave up your DNA and they figured out there's this likely probability. Everything's probability, right? So there's a greater probability that you're going to come down with diabetes. And so they'll charge you more for that diabetes. And it's, to me, it is the lack of regulation here that is unreal. And now you're seeing that at airports, the pictures that are taken of passengers arriving and leaving got hacked. So now they have database profile pictures of people recently. And again, every single social thing that you can think of, everything you do in public is already recorded in many ways, right? When you travel, your face is recorded. That's put into some database. Some company has it. Again, it's not like the Gestapo, like the government can just pick up your picture and be like, oh, this guy, we've been looking for him. I guess we can. Although I'm sure that is happening. I'm guaranteeing you that is happening, right? It just isn't happening to large percentages of people. But you can already see drones flying around this country and taking photographs of people and just scanning faces. And people will say, well, they're scanning faces of everyday people, and they're only looking for a small number of people who shouldn't be in this country, or who are criminals, or who are all these things. And are we willing to allow them to capture all of the data that they will be capturing of random people walking around? Because that is where we're headed. We are headed to a world of total surveillance, total social control. And I'm not exaggerating here, and I'm not doing this so people get even more paranoid, because I don't think paranoia is really going to solve this sort of issues that we're experiencing today when it comes to the digital economy. I don't think it is, because you can go out and try to protect your data and do all of these things, and that's fine to do if that's what you feel like doing. But in many ways, you have to engage in a political struggle. You have to engage in a political fight to protect yourself. I mean, people don't realize, as this sort of technology consumes us, in my opinion, this rise of authoritarianism is directly linked to this outgrowth in technology that is consuming our lives and in many ways directing what people do subconsciously. Facebook has already done this, begun to manipulate people without telling them. But Facebook has manipulated how people feel by promoting sadder stories in their news feed. Like, imagine if I had ability to code, and I could code and figure out all this previous data about you. I could figure out what type of articles you like, but then also begin to slowly integrate marketing ploys and different products that we think you'll be using in the next 6 months to a year, right? And those companies could pay me because I have this special skill that I could figure out if I know all about you, and I know your data, and I know what your habits are, and I know where you'll be, I know where you live, I know where your family is, I know where your work is. Who's really in charge in this economy, right? It's these data brokers, okay? That is what needs to get exposed. And so, look, when I put the entire economy in this context of this digital economy, like I was doing today, there is no doubt in my mind that exposing those who control the data economy, shedding light on those economy, is actually a political act. And people can love or hate WikiLeaks, it doesn't matter. Their targets have been largely the governments, okay? They largely want to take up power against government. But there also needs to be a WikiLeaks that also is tailored and focused around these data brokers and this data economy. And they need to be exposed for what they are doing to the United States and to the American people and to people all around the world. What people think about these ideas that I'm talking about. But I understand how the economy functions today, okay? And I understand, and I already can foresee what the future will be about this digital economy. And everything I'm telling you right now about health insurance, life insurance, car insurance, they will be pushing this area forward in the future. Or they may be monitoring your car for, instead of 3 months, 6 months, right? Currently, you can do that with your certain car insurance companies. They'd love to monitor your car for 3 months and then offer you a lower discount on your car insurance, right? This is where it's all going to, folks. This is where it's all going to. And let me tell you another disruption that will happen in the future as well, that I love talking about and telling my friends who own homes around this area out here in Western Massachusetts. Housing value in the future. Man, I hope some people sell their houses for what they think is worth, because if the trends that are currently happening today continue, high student debt, people not buying homes, people starting families later, the demand for homes will continue to fall and fall and fall until people will say, you know what, I don't want to buy a home for $250,000. I rather spend $70,000, buy the land, and then spend $45,000, $50,000 on a small home, on one of those tiny homes. You're beginning to see the push. I mean, what really gives a home a value, right? Ask yourself that question. Ask yourself, why does my home, okay, why is it worth $275,000, $350,000? Oh, it's because of the schools. Oh, it's because of the land that comes with the homes. There's no actual value around that. The value is that people believe that home, that you believe that home can sell for $320,000, $350,000. Because let me say this, if nobody wants to spend $350,000 on that home, you're never going to sell it for $350,000 because no one believes that is an accurate value of that home. Okay? Nobody does. There is absolutely no value to your home unless other people agree with your valuation. And if they all disagree with your valuation of your home, where is your price going to go? It's going to go down. And the reason it go down because you're hoping that somebody's going to say, hey, maybe your home is worth $250, right? Instead of $325, now it's worth $250 because somebody's willing to fork over and say, hey, here, take my $250, right? Now I own your home. But again, it's the value is based on the perception of the buyer. They think that your home is worth that X amount of money. I think it's going to be a big shock for people especially living in the suburbs. And those homes going for $425, $450, $500,000 for a home after you still have $100,000, $150,000 in student loan debt, living at home, making $13, $14, $15 an hour. You must be out of your mind. And we're talking about millions of people in that economy in this way. And I'm going to it's the economy and politics are the two topics that I love talking about the most. Those are the two topics I absolutely love doing. I think the fact that the economy has such a powerful influence over people is why I'm fascinated by it. And of course, politics is my lifeblood, so I love talking about. But you also can't separate politics from everyday events that people do, right? Is it a political decision the way you go to work today? Is it politics the way where you buy your food? Everything has become political in this society. And people, again, want to run away. I think a lot of people have this feeling that we should just go back to the way it was, when you could just watch sports and it not be political. Why does everything have to be politicized? It is the society that we live in, and it is this sort of constant penetration, I would say, of technology has made politicizing of everything, right? So enough people believe that environmental damage is done by cars is a political choice. So you can begin to see that almost every decision you make, every exchange of money, or every use of public roads and the use of a car is a political decision, is a political choice in some ways. And we have to come to terms with, yes, that's true. So we need to begin to design politics and societies that understand that and that create cities, let's say, without cars. And say, no, you don't get a car. So everything that you need is in walking distance, or you can use a bike, and there will be no cars. But there was an interesting article, I think it was based out of China, that they were designing a city with no cars ever to be driven in that city. And it's these sort of ideas that really are important. And so my final point, and I wanted to kind of close out on talking about data and technology, and I think maybe the way people today maybe feel overwhelmed by society. People feel exhausted and anxiety. And I think a large part of this, look, we can talk about Trump and the rise of far right and all of that, but I actually don't want to necessarily talk about that as I think the overriding consequence of why we're feeling overwhelmed and anxious by this data economy. And it isn't so much just how much they're penetrating into our lives, but I want to say that people feel anxious, I think, in this way because data is just what I have in my mind and what I'm saying or what I'm writing, right? And we are producing, a large number of people are producing data. I guess this podcast is an example of this. And that's what we're all doing, is constantly producing data. And people are either producing or consuming that data. And when you have a large number of people producing massive amounts of data, and they know so much about you, and they tailor that, and then you get to read those articles, people can feel overwhelmed by it, or they want to go into their tribe and feel cocooned. They want to feel protected and isolated. So they go to the things that they already believe in, right? Because to go and read articles that are in different perspectives or are critiquing the things you believe in, it's difficult to process all of that, especially when you're getting bombarded from all sides and people have begun to use hyperbolic names about everything, and people are feeling like there's just too much data. So we're in the age of mass data, okay? There's too much, there's almost so much data that I can't as a human being process all of this data, right? And it's why I guess we need systems, computers, AI, whatever you want to call it, to make sense of this data, to collect this, amass this data, and do something with that data, right? But I guess the ultimate power is who gets to code those who get to aggregate the data, right? Who gets to aggregate the data, and then what are they going to do with that data, right? How do they make sense of that data? That is large parts of where we are, I think, in society. And I think what would help human beings is to stop with the mass production of data and to begin to help human beings consume data and contradictory information and data and help them make sense of it. Okay, so let's just say I am obese and I need to figure out how to lose weight. You have like 15 different diet plans. Well, which one has had the most success, right? It all depends on your ability to filter through this data, to make sense of this mass production of data, because we're needing not just a large number of data, but we're looking for quality of data. How do you come up with quality in data? Okay, that is what's important, I think, in the future, is that how do you develop quality? And I think quality, in large part, we're seeing is just based on people's previous reputations. This person been a scholar, or has this person been an influencer, they call it, right? So the people believe that this person carries some insightful wisdom. I guess I create this podcast because I hope I upset people, and I hope that people argue with what I'm talking about and complain or say this guy's absolutely wrong and here's why to their friends, but hopefully share this episode. Again, it is, we're in the age of the guardrails of what journalism used to do has been upended by the mass production of data. Now everybody's a journalist. I'm a journalist. My neighbors are journalists. Everybody who gets to produce data gets to claim some journalistic title, which obviously isn't true. Obviously, there should be some sort of credential, but then should the state be the credentialing force of what journalism is? No. Right? I mean, that's a bit weird, but there might need to be some, no, this was published by a journalist who went to journalism school and is able to do journalistic work. But I don't see that happening at all. So, and I don't think we're going there, that some people are going to be a credentialed journalist and some people aren't. I don't think that's a solution to it. It's a matter of people are going to have to figure out what is not worth your time and what is worth your time and what is informative, and then hopefully they share that informative information. But the way I've oftentimes seen the internet is things that are salacious, things that are outright mean, vile attacks, wicked, whatever is extreme and different gets much more popular than nuanced and articulate and well thought out. People aren't into that all the time, right? They want to see videos that embarrass people or that reinforce stereotypes or that attack people or that are mean or whatever it is, because that's going to get viral number of hits, right? And so this all goes back to how the digital economy makes money is by getting more and more people to give out, to spread the video and to get more people to watch the video, right? And then as long as that's the incentive isn't aligned with nuanced and thought-provoking videos and articles. It's with extreme diatribes against your political enemies. That's the world we live in today. And I wanted to talk about this because I have talked about it in a previous episode, but I clearly haven't talked enough about it. But it is the era where we're living in right now. And so I just thought I'd share this. Yes, it was wide-ranging, and I talked about a number of different topics, and I will share some of the very specific data stories as I get through Shoshana Zuboff's book, Surveillance Capitalism. I'm going to share some of the more outrageous stories that I think she cites in the book. But yeah, this is the future economy. And I just want to add that, and maybe this is a good part about the economy. I said it's kind of been a depressing episode in talking about the economy, but what the future economy will hold isn't just everybody's going to have to learn how to code and data and STEM is the only thing. No, they're going to have to be people who produce content, people who are artistic and do things that nobody else has done, who has given a lot of. There have to be artists. There has to be a countervailing force to this STEM push in society. And people need to come up with creative ideas, creative thoughts, and put those into the public stream, into the public consciousness. Try to gain popular appeal that way, right? Not to just create things for yourself, but to sort of create things for yourself that then you put out there for the world to see and criticize and hate on. Because people shouldn't feel afraid that just because some people say that what you're producing sucks or that it's terrible and it's garbage and it's useless, so what? So what? That's a person's opinion. Respect it, actually. Should respect people's diverging viewpoints. It's part of democracy, right? It could be pretty mean and it could be pretty hurtful, and people can tell you things that you probably don't want to hear. And it's either up to you to say, look, I agree or disagree with it. And I think that that's where art and theater and all of these things have to now be produced in a public way, right? And what do I mean by that is you're going to have to be produced for the internet. Everything's got to be recorded. Everything's got to be published online. That we shouldn't just do things for our selfish own interests and private for ourselves, but a lot of what we create now has to be created and put out into the public domain. And students today are into computer science and they're all into that, but I'm terrified about what that will lead to. It will lead to a society that controls people's data and information on how the internet works, and it could go very poorly against people and actually hurt human beings, or it can go towards, I think, technological liberation for people and upending work, creating a ability to get an education for free, and that is the best quality education tailored towards you. Right? It's also going to be an amazing and powerful economy that heals people from debilitating diseases and from very deadly cancers. And you're going to be able to live for a very, very long time, possibly forever. Right? And so, look, as much as I've been talking sort of more skeptical about where the digital economy is today, there are some amazing things that this digital economy is creating, right? Space travel. I mean, I'm a huge fan of that. That's where we gotta go. We have to go beyond the planet Earth and expand the human civilization. That is what human beings were meant to do and be. And so I just want to end with this final comment, if anybody's still listening at this point. But I do post all my articles eventually to archive.org under Collateral Banter. Really enjoyed doing this episode, even though it wasn't like previous episodes. We just kind of talked about the economy, the data economy, and its connection to slavery. It's similarities to slavery. All right. Well, that wraps up Collateral Banter episode 36. The next episode I record will be next week. My friend Jerry will be on to talk about Jean Baudrillard. We're going to talk about the book America that Jean Baudrillard wrote, and so hopefully people stay tuned for that. But more Collateral Banter at you. Take care. Hope you enjoyed this episode. More to come. Peace.